Okay. Can you see my screen, Steve?
I can, yep.
Okay, cool. Okay, well, it is 5 o'clock, so I'll do a quick checkout.
They're coming.
I'll see if there's anybody else at the door.
Oh.
Hey guys, how are you?
Yeah. Good. Allie is coming, so she can.
Okay.
This back where I told her.
Okay. Cool. So we run into some technical problems. We have my laptop screen.
Oh, so come.
So you have to gather around.
Should we get close?
Yeah.
Here?
We'll snuggle in.
Sounds great.
You can come sit by.
Is that your purse?
It is, yes. You can, I can move it or be it.
I suggested a USB cable to this, but alas. That's
Yeah.
Yeah. What would you like?
Remember we said we were clearing down some things?
Yeah.
And then we can. This way.
Yeah.
Might be a little.
Yeah.
easier. Or not, but.
That'll
A
work.
little bit.
I'm good. You're good? Yeah. Okay.
So
You
Steve,
know what I think I might do?
Steve seeing it on Teams?
Yes, Steve's on Teams.
I am,
Yeah.
but remember, if you want to put it up on the big screen, you could just put me on the phone if that's easier, Dylan, your choice.
Yeah, I can't get it on the big screen, unfortunately.
The
Okay,
2 tin cans and the string aren't working.
gotcha.
Next time maybe I'll kick it old school and bust out the overhead.
Awesome. Oh, what about those ones that had the rolling clear paper that you could write on, that had the light that shone down on it?
That's what he's talking about.
Right, yeah.
All right, well, thanks for coming today. 24-25 budget planning. Here we are. First, before we get going, always want to acknowledge the lands that we're on. It's a privilege to be able to gather on the traditional unceded territories of Lakewood, Clapna, and Silt people. And this last weekend, I'm not sure about each of you, but I had opportunity to be out on the land, and it's so good to be out enjoying the sun, enjoying being out on the land. And so it's a real privilege that we can learn together and work together and play together on these lands. And so I want to recognize our traditional unceded territories. Also want to recognize our Métis communities in the town of Princeton and Merritt as well, and the contributions they bring. And so a little different format, getting a little cozy today as we gather around the laptop screen here, and Mr. McNiven, our superintendent, is online joining us. So yeah, we're here today to start the planning process for the budget season for next year, 24-25. And so want to take you through a series of slides. We're gonna take a look at our strategic plan. So I'm just looking at some of the general goals that we have. Everything that we do, we want to make sure that we're connected to the strategic plan. And followed by that, we'll do a brief overview of the budget cycle. And then we'll take a look at the sources of funding that we have for the school year and the information that we have so far as we head into the next school year. And then finally, we'll take a look at we have some discussion planning questions that will take you through as well. And of course, after that, open the floor and invite any general feedback and questions that you might have. So our strategic plan, we finished our strategic plan right on the doorstep of the atmospheric flooding events that affected us. And as a result of that, the Board of Education's just approved a 2-year extension on the strategic plan. And so we're now re-looking at 2026 as when this plan will come to expiration, and we'll restart the process all over again. Taking a look at the strategic plan, and I would encourage you on our website. There's a lot of good information. There's a nice video that provides you an overview of the strategic plan, which is much nicer than what I'm giving you here today. Not to mention, we do have a nice visual overview of the strategic plan that is available for you, and you'll probably see it up throughout some of our schools. It's on our website that's available for you. And there's also there's a lot of information connected to this, and it is on our website. I want to bring awareness to that. If you go onto the website and you hover over about, you should be able to get to the strategic plan there, and you can see all of the resources that I'm referring to. But to provide you with just a general overview of the goals that came out of that, and the strategic plan being a collection of 450 voices. And out of those voices, we came up with 4 goals. Goal number 1, meaning and purpose. And when we talk about meaning and purpose, we're talking about engaging in our learning community through a common understanding and commitment to the purpose and pursuit of student success. Goal number 2 is appreciation and respect. And we start to think about creating a culture of care built on respect and appreciation. Goal number 3 is connection. And we want to build capacity by connecting students, families, staff, and the greater community to learning. And goal number 4 is organizational excellence. And we want to make sure that we have accurate reporting, that we're using the best processes and the best technology, which maybe might be an issue. When you look at this, there's a lot in there. So I injected a few more slides because I thought it's really worth just taking a look at what these goals represent. And I don't typically read right off of PowerPoint slides, but for this, I feel it's really important. And when we talk about meaning and purpose, we're talking about the statements that we've come up with are that students will personalize their learning in ways that meet their unique strengths, needs, and interests. Students will continuously improve their literacy and numeracy skills as they develop the skills and competencies for future success. The district will communicate the data, partner input, and research used in guiding district vision and direction with students, families, staff, and communities. Families, staff, and community will have an understanding of the roles and responsibilities of those supporting students in the district. And finally, students, staff, and families will be aware of the purpose and meaning of assessment and data collection within the district. And so it's just getting a little bit more deeper into goal number 1. When we're taking a deeper dive into goal number 2, some of the statements that we have are students, families, staff, and community will have high degrees of engagement with their learning and school activities. Students and staff will report feeling physical and emotionally safe in schools and community. The district will demonstrate a strong organizational culture focused on continuous collaborative professional learning and improvement. Students, families, and community will have high levels of trust and report feeling safe in both daily and ongoing communication. And students, families, and community will confirm that their values and traditions are both reflected and valued within the district. Goal number 4, the statements that we have published, is that students, families, yes, okay. Oh, sorry, goal number 3.
That was just a test, right?
Getting ahead of myself. Students, families, staff, and community will report open and respectful communication. Indigenous pedagogy, including place-based learning, will continue to be supported, developed, and implemented across the district. The district will develop and maintain a streamlined, comprehensive educational support process for student and staff mental wellness. Students and families will confirm that they feel welcome and supported in their schools. And finally, the district will maintain existing and establish new partnerships with institutions, organizations, or agencies that provide valuable, meaningful, and relevant services or opportunities to all students and families. Now, the guiding principles that guide us as we make decisions and that come around these goals, and it'll be hard for you to see, but our guiding principles here on the screen, starting at the top left and moving to the right, is innovation, and promising educational practices. Inclusion, equity, dignity, and diversity. Relationships built on trust and mutual respect. The well-being of students, families, staff, and the community. The pursuit of excellence, personal best, and citizenship. The heritage and culture of Indigenous peoples and the recognition of the traditional territories of the Ikaklavna and Silks people. And finally, the important role families have in their children's education. And so that's it to give you an overview of our strategic direction, the goals that we have as a district, and that the board is making on a monthly and annual basis, and the principles that affect our decision making. And I just thought, it's really important to bring that up as we head into budget season, to be reminded of what's strategically important to us. And going from there, we can start head into some of the actual financial parts of the school district and what that starts to look like. And wanted to start here with the budget cycle. And the school year, planning for the school year actually starts in February. And so this past February, we would have completed enrollment projections of what we think is going to happen for the next year. And we actually forecast out 3 years. And we submit that to the ministry, and that enrollment projection sets the stage for funding. And mid-March, we received an announcement, as did all other school districts, from the Ministry of Education and Childcare on the estimated operating grants that would be provided for providing educational services for the next school year. And then now we are in our planning stage. Today is the first day of that planning stage. But ultimately working towards a June 30th deadline, where we'll be presenting our budget to trustees. Our goal is to have first reading before trustees in the May open board meeting, and then bring second and third reading in June. But June 30th is our deadline to submit it to the ministry. And then as we start the school year off, June 30th is our snapshot date, where every student is confirmed in the province where they attended school. And that data is then used by the ministry to determine what our final funding allocations are. And we receive that information in December. And so it's not until almost halfway through the school year that we actually find out what our final numbers are. And that, which is why we start with an annual budget that we're now working on. And then we prepare an amended annual budget in January. We bring that to the board in February for approval. And so now we are running now on the 23-24 amended annual budget, and we're now preparing for the preliminary, or the annual budget, or some people call it preliminary budget, for next year. The majority of the school district funding comes from provincial grants, which I have just referred to, and which we'll provide a little bit more information on later on in the slide deck here. But we do generate some additional revenue through renting out our facilities and entering into lease agreements with leaseholders. But it by no means represents the lion's share of the funding that we receive, but we do receive a small amount of revenue. And we also earn revenue on short-term deposits in the bank account as well. The majority of our expenses are fixed in nature. And as with most organizations, salaries are a major component. Our human resources are a major component and expense of what we do, as with utilities and other building related expenses. And so really, we have contractual agreements that we need to abide by, such as the QP union or teachers union, and other contracts that we enter into with the Ministry of Education. And really, when it comes down to it, we have less than 10% and arguably less than 5% of discretionary spending. Spending that we have complete, like, oh, we can spend it on whatever we want. But when we think about our discretionary spending, we think about different priorities and needs that we have. And some of those needs are school supplies, learning resources, field trips, for example. Once the budget is approved by our board, that provides the school district with the authority to carry out all of these functions that we're talking about. Now, when we talk about the budget, we have three sources of funding. The primary bucket or fund that we have is the operating fund. And that really is, generally speaking, what we're talking mostly about tonight is the operating fund. It represents the majority of the money that we receive. But we do have two other sources of funding. We have special purpose funds. And we also have our capital funding, which runs on a bit of a different schedule. And we'll get on to a little bit more details on that in a couple slides here. When we look at the annual budget, and I know this is small, and so it's hard to see, but I'll read it out here for you. The breakdown of what that looks like is 55% of our funding is our basic allocation, which is our school FTE and our online learning. We have about 11% that comes from our local education agreement, which is the funding that we receive from our rights holders. And we have unique student needs that represent 18%. It could include anything from a student designation to our English French learning, our Indigenous education that we provide throughout the school district. We have 15% that is represented by, it's a supplement for unique geographic factors. So depending on where you live in the province, that supplemental factor can change. It factors in things such as, living in a colder climate means you have more heating costs. And so they factor that into the funding formula. And then we have a very small pocket money for our curriculum and learning support fund. And of course, our funding is driven by student FTE, which is why we do the initial enrollment in February, and then we finalize that in September. A little bit more information about our local education agreement. And so Indigenous Services Canada, which is a federal funder, they provide funding to Indigenous students, and that funding goes directly to the First Nations, to our rights holders. Some of those students may choose to attend a school on reserve, in which case that funding would stay there. But some Indigenous students that live on reserve may choose to attend a public school, in which case the money is intended to follow where the student attends school. And so in this case, what we do is we have a local education agreement that's established between the school district and our First Nations. And that local education agreement provides the mechanism in a way that we would bill the First Nations, and that money would flow through to the school district. At a high level here, our operating grants. So we're going from a student FTE of 2,039, and this is based on September. So this is a September to September last year to our projection for this year to 2027. So a small drop in student FTE is what is anticipated. Our funding is going from $26.9 million to $28 million. And so in the previous slide, I just said, well, our funding is connected to FTE. So why is our funding going up when our FTE is going down? And the reason for that is that there is an uplift to the funding that's attached to the agreements that we have, for our salaries and benefits that we provide for staff. And so when it comes to the collective agreement and the provisions that are inside those agreements that are attached to the funder, which is the Ministry of Education, they do factor in the collective agreements as part of the funding. And so that is largely why that number is larger, even though the enrollment has gone down. Jamie?
Out of curiosity, how do you determine your projected FTEs? Like you said we're gonna have less
Yeah.
students next school year. How are you, like, how does that come up?
Yeah. That's a great question. And, you know, Mr. McNiven may want to chime in here as well, but
Sure.
Sure. We have, we actually have a template that's provided by the ministry. They actually provide us with what they project for us. And then we have information that we factor in, such as birth rates. And Steve, maybe I'll let you chime in on that in terms of how we come across that information.
Thanks, Dylan. Yeah, you're correct. We, through public health, have birth rate numbers that we use and keep track of. So it gives us an idea of how many children are born for a particular year. And then secondly, we look at our current enrollment and track how many students are exiting via grade 12, how many students are entering. And most of our decline in enrollment is, well, it's fairly obvious, is the fact that we've got larger cohort groups going out at the senior level and fewer kids coming in. So we just lose them naturally through that process right now.
Thank you.
Yeah. A good question. This here's a look at our grant highlights for next year. And so I'll just read it off. Our base enrollment funding is going from 14.9 million to 15.4 million. Our enrollment funding from our rights holders is staying at 3.1 million. That again will, you know, once we find out what our numbers are in September, that number could change, as will the base enrollment funding. Our supplement for unique student needs is going from 4.6 million to $5 million. Supplement for unique geographic factors going from 4.1 to $4.2 million. The supplement for enrollment decline and funding protection has been zero this year and is expected to be zero next year. Funding protection is a provision that kicks in if enrollment declines greater than 1.5%. And it's just a provision that's in place to protect school districts from significant loss in enrollment. Our school district has been in funding protection in previous years. For the previous couple of years, we have not been in funding protection. And then our curriculum and learning support has had a small uplift from $17,000 to $18,000. This here is looking at our amended annual budget and wanted to give you a bit of an outlook of what it actually looks like this year to kind of give you a bit of a context for what next year could look like. And so our total expenses for this year is expected to be $29.4 million. And that's represented by instructional costs. And when we think of instructional costs, we're not just talking about salaries and benefits, but we're also talking about the supplies and services that go into that. So it's the full array of expenses. District administration is 1.7 million. Our operations and maintenance is expected to be about $4.1 million. Transportation services, $1.3 million. So for a total spend of 29.4 million, our revenue for this year is expected to be 28.7. And so our budgeted deficit for the 23-24 school year is minus $713,000. That was up a little bit from the preliminary or annual budget. And so that is where we're anticipating to end for this year, if everything happens the way we think it's going to happen. A little bit on accumulated operating surplus. So a district is expected to operate on a balanced budget. The ministry won't allow a board to submit a budget that's not balanced. But in the case where we have an accumulated operating surplus, the board has some ability to take on additional expenses and use its accumulated operating surplus to cover that. And that's been the strategy of the district for the past number of years is drawing down from its accumulated operating surplus. This here is a slide that shows how much the operating surplus has been used each year. So in this particular slide here goes back, and this slide deck will be published on our website, so you'll be able to access it. But back in 2016, we were at minus $641,000, and you can see that's fluctuated a bit since then. In 2021, 22, the year of the flood, we had a small surplus. Our spending patterns completely affected, as you can imagine. But last year, we returned to where we were intentionally drawing down that surplus, and that is our expectation this year as well, and will likely be our expectation as we head into next year. This slide here looks at the actual balance of the accumulated operating surplus and what has happened with that balance year over year. So you can see that it's gone from $5 million in the 2016-17 year, and we're down to, as of last year, at $2.2 million.
Just to clarify, this is on purpose though, like we are
Yeah.
purposely drawing this
Yeah.
down because we were carrying too large a surplus, if my
Yeah.
understanding is correct.
That's correct, yeah. So our current policy is to carry 10% in the way of contingency reserve. That policy is expected to change and to move to a 2 to 4% threshold, which is a better place to be, so that we're not hanging on to too much in the way of reserve, but we're hanging on to enough. And so that is the direction headed.
Dylan, just to clarify, that policy was updated some time ago, so it's in place.
Thank you for clarifying that.
3 to 5 now, isn't it?
3 to 5, 2 to 4.
I think it's 2 to 4.
It's
Yeah.
2 to 4.
2 to 4% of the previous year's operating expenses is how that's calculated. Yeah, so it's something that we take a look at year end to see where is our contingency reserve at in relation to our policy. So a little bit more information on contingency reserve. The board does have the responsibility to protect the district financially from extraordinary circumstances that happen from time to time, and our district has definitely been victim to that, unfortunately. And to help discharge that fiduciary responsibility, that's why we have that contingency reserve. And as we clarified and mentioned in this presentation, I think I have it at 10%, but that policy has now been changed to 2 to 4%. So that is the operating fund. And so a little bit on special purpose funds, not getting too deep into it, but when we talk about special purpose funds, there are 3 primary factors that really pinpoint what a special purpose fund is. It's something that's restricted, so it's a source of funding that we get that has to be used for a certain mandate. It's typically funding that spans over a 1-year period. And it has very unique attributes in terms of reporting. And so for that reason, we deem it as a special purpose fund, and we keep it in a different part of the district book so that it's easy, it's visible, it's transparent. Some of the special purpose funds that we have are the Classroom Enhancement Fund, the Community Links Fund, our Strong Start Program, our Learning Improvement Funds, and more recently, we've been receiving a Feeding Futures Fund and the Student Family and Affordability Fund.
With Riverside going to be like with Strong Start, still it's be in the budget for merit, but with the facility replace the Strong Start to Princeton? Or?
No, the John Ellison Strong Start will continue.
Oh,
Yeah,
I didn't
yes,
know if it.
Yeah, separate mandate.
Okay.
Yeah. Moving from our special purpose funds to our third and final source of funding is our capital funding. And so the Ministry of Education and Childcare provides funding for capital to acquire capital, to improve it, and to extend its useful life. And when we're talking about capital, we're talking about land, talking about buildings, talking about equipment. Some of our our capital programs are our annual facilities grant that we receive. That's the money that we use to replace flooring, put paint on the walls, and those kinds of expenses. We have a minor capital program that is used to for playgrounds and other smaller type HVAC projects on the roof. And then we do have major capital programs that will come into play if you're looking at building a new school or an extension on a school or something of that magnitude. We do have, the school district does have restricted capital, which is money that was left over from previous capital projects. And the ministry has asked us to put it into our ministry restricted capital fund. It's a source of funding that we can access, but it's at the under the approval of our board, of course, but also under the approval of the Ministry of Education and Childcare. And then our last source is our insurance flood event. Believe it or not, we're still in the wrap-up stages of that, and so we're hoping to be done with that here in the next little bit. So essentially, the school district's budget is a consolidation of the operating funds, which we talked about, and we went through the preliminary or the estimated numbers that we have for next year, the special purpose funds and capital funds. We're anticipating that we'll have the budget ready to go and present to the board in May for first reading. So it's going to be a busy month, and so really happy to be here tonight to share this information with you, to create awareness about the process and what comes into it, and to bring awareness to our strategic plan and the guiding principles that guide us along the way. I did prepare some questions that help us just dive into different parts of the strategic plan and to get us thinking about that. And the goal of it is to just have general discussion, but then also to then fuel into anything specific that might be on your minds tonight. So the first question that I have, and I will take notes on my phone. I'm not texting on my phone. Is on here I have, in what specific ways do you think the school district can better align its activities with its strategic objectives?
Well, one thing that I think about here in Princeton is when you talked about the goal of connection specifically. I don't know if that's technically a strategic objective or not, but
It's one of our goals.
So I'll go with it. Personally, I would love to see sort of a welcome. I don't know if we could do a welcome barbecue at the beginning of every school year, but it would be a really great way. I feel like families are slowly starting to come back. I'm fairly new to this community. I've only lived here for a year and a half, but the first school year, if it wasn't for Barry and the two the two secretaries at the time, they're no longer there, but anyway, they were there making like personal connections with our family. It would have been a little bit harder. I found I think there's like an opportunity for district representation to be kind of at our sort of welcome to the start of the year. It would be really helpful to kind of welcome families, have an intro to the school. We do kind of is that under book fair night? Open house. Yeah, that's what, yeah. So like, it would be really great, I think, because I didn't know any trustees before I moved here. Obviously, I was new, but like determining that who those people are, having a friendly face, like being at our welcome back events or whatever would be kind of nice.
Do you see that as a school-based barbecue event or community-based?
Well, I think that's the ones that I've been to, it's mainly school-based.
Yeah.
The thing is, what I see at VFE in particular, and my kid was only at John Nelson for a year, so I can't really speak to that school, but because because VFE is located in such a strong neighborhood, there are always family and young families typically coming to use the playground equipment. Like as soon as 3:30 hits, like and the kids are all on the bus, there's families out walking, and it doesn't matter if it's winter or spring. So I do feel like it could be potentially a community event and making schools sort of feel more community oriented, yeah, like they used to a little bit. But that's just.
Thank you. I appreciate, sorry if I can comment, appreciate the input, and it also fits very well with our communication plan. So I've taken it down as a note for us to consider going into next year with. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
And I was also just going to add in that the committee that's been working on the equity scan, one of the things that came up out of there was to put in 2 more community connection events during the course of the year. So that ties in with that as well.
Thank you, Barry.
I just think food is important. Food brings people out and like, you know, we've got like Jeff Ryan, we could barbecue, like we could throw that together easily.
Yeah.
I think. It would be a good time for us to.
Part
bring
of
more
that maybe
people in.
getting the principal sharing what they're already doing, because I know Bert does an event out at Nicola Canford, and I know Bench has used some of their mental health fund. They're doing things throughout the year. Even nights for parents, be doing things with their kids in the gym and welcome dinner, and they do a series of things throughout. They're doing something every month now, right?
Yeah.
I think so.
And it's good for parents too, like as a parent, I mean, I've met those people I know through my kids, so it's as much of a benefit for just the community connection with parents too, meeting people, so if they're feeling isolated, that's maybe a good way for them to bridge that.
The open house is pretty lively. Like this last year it was like there was tons of kids and parents and it was good, but just.
Park's just getting back to some of that too, because we went through the 2 years of COVID where no one was allowed in the schools from the health order, including trustees. So it was like, you're not allowed to attend. Now we're just slowly getting back to, you're actually welcome in the school again. But, that was a pretty hard 2 years of, no, you're not, even kids in the building, you were restricted to your classroom. You could walk to school with a brother or sister, but God help you if you met them in the hallway.
Question number 2. From your perspective, which initiatives outlined in the strategic plan should be prioritized for funding in the upcoming budget cycle? And why?
I have to have a list of the initiatives
Yeah.
maybe in front of me.
Can we broaden that question to what things would be important just in general
Sure.
for funding?
The flip side of that is if it's not in the strategic plan, we shouldn't be spending money on it.
Yeah.
So if I have a passion for something that's not in the plan, Dale's going to tell me it's not in the plan.
So Jamie, keeping Gordon's comment in mind around focus, I think it is fair to open it up. There might be some items that people have come forward with that we can see if they align well with the strategic plan or adjust. It's important to stay focused, but it's also important to have people's ideas. So if there's something in general that people came to the table with today, it'd be great to hear it.
I don't know if this is too specific or not, like for locally, for mental health and for our students and counseling. We share one counselor through our schools, and it's not a full-time position. I don't know if it's 0.8 because it's Monday to Thursday between the 3 schools. I don't know if this is the right time to bring this up or not, but it's just if we're wanting to treat the whole child and the mental health and everything, I wonder if more funding could go towards. I know it's hard to look at that to see if that's an option. And I don't know Merit what's available. I just know in Princeton we have one person available Monday to Thursday, but between the 3 schools, and we can be pretty stretched thin, especially with everything all the kids have gone through and it's just I don't know if it's pertaining to this discussion point, but gag.
I think it does.
Yeah.
Mental health.
Mental-
Yeah.
And I think it.
Yeah.
Some of that's how we push the other 19 out, like as a board. We brought forward provincially, gotten support of the other boards in the province, youth mental health workers. So outside of the 5 hours in the schools year, I think to close to 4 years, Princeton. Minister of Children and Families hasn't filled the position. Seven. So we're pushing at that and going to saying,
Mhm.
it's a
Well-
community piece, not simply what happens in that schoolhouse. And so we're pushing up the other end to say that needs to be funded as well.
And I think specifically we asked for funding to entice people to come to rural districts like Princeton, yes, but also other, any rural area, because we just don't have the resources to attract people. So that was the motion that he's talking about that we put forward provincially to basically ask for, some solutions to be put
Right.
forward for us to get those people here, because it's not even just whether or not we have the funding to have them, it's can we find people to come here? And that's been a struggle as much as
But there's an opportunity too, as parents, this being an election year, and certain people wanting to be your MLA again, to bring up those same questions with all the parties that are running is how do we, because I think we've heard about cell phones and housing, that's about,
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
whether, well, probably too young to have phones in your school, but, well, it should be too young,
It should be.
but, that student still using that device outside of that. But aside from that is, how are we handling the mental health issues that come with that technology?
I think the people heard, like specifically for me as a mom, I think having physically more bodies working on mental health specifically in our schools is important to me. And I understand salary and benefits are pretty much your biggest expenses but I think that's how we're going to, is getting people, I know that we used to have Jamie, but she's no longer.
That was not the position that's not filled, was Jamie Nesbitt.
that's, I believe, through Interior Health, though. I don't think that's a school district
Interest.
position.
So she used to work for ICE.
She used to work-
was
yeah.
contracted.
And I only know that because, she never worked, as far as I know, I don't think she was ever an employee of the school district. It was an Interior Health program that linked with the school. And so maybe that's something we can.
We do have a contract with MCFD.
Yeah.
For mental health clinician.
That's not Interior Health, though, that would be.
That would be.
This one I'm talking about the MCFD.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So anyways, yeah, like I think for me personally, I absolutely agree with you, Hallie. There's like a real importance for me to have physically more people. And it also, I think too, when I think about is the mental health and well-being of our staff as well. And like having resource, like people that know what they're talking about, you know what I mean, that are skilled and educated in those areas. I think it also helps with just the mental well-being of all people at the school, not just the students, but the staff as well. And yeah, I feel like there's, just more opportunity there to, but I don't know, like, how do we get more? Cause I'm like, how do we get more staff in this area? I don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, we're presently down slightly because we are down from the 1.0 to the 0.8. So that's an accurate number there. And filling that extra time is important regardless of where we go with the budget. That's helpful. Dylan is correct. We have partnered with MCFD and we've been making available an extra $27,000 a year to help support counseling when those counselors are filled and available. So there might be a need to shift it with that as well. But again, I think your timing of bringing this up is important because this is the time when we look at staffing. I'll be realistic, there's not a endless pot of money, but I know that mental health is on everybody's mind and
We're breaking up a little bit here, Steve.
That would put another dollar in.
2 bits.
Hey, Steve, can you still hear us? Awesome.
The staff also do have an EAP option available to them. It's not something necessarily in the school, but there are resources for them as well, just as an aside. Some interest to these.
So our third question is a little more open-ended and invitational. Are there any new initiatives or projects you believe should be considered for inclusion in the budget to better achieve the school district's strategic goals?
I don't know if there's a way to bring the two, like I know we're one district, but Merritt and Princeton together, like, we're in the same district, but other than like, I think they go for a couple, like, I don't know if there's a way to bring the students together. I guess the sports, like the kids go play sports, but, and they look forward to it, like super. So hopefully that there's enough busing funding, you know, like, because that's one way I feel like the kids are united in our district, but, and then maybe they go to NVIT for the power, you know, there's a few things, but, or I guess I maybe reiterate how important it is, the busing trips for, like, even if it's sports, that the kids go together and play, like Princeton, they only probably have Merit to go to play for the sports, or it's, yeah, just to hopefully keep that able to go for the schools, and if not, to bring the kids together somehow more. We're the same district, but really, other than,
We want to feel a little less separated.
yeah. So I really hope they don't lose, like, the ability to do the travel things within Merit. Yeah.
Yeah, I think especially coming out of the pandemic and flood, like the need for connection is even just amplified.
Yeah, and it could have been before more connected, and my child was younger, you know, like, it could have, I don't know, like,
Yeah.
it just now, she's in grade 6, you know, you just notice that. It'd be nice to have.
Yeah. Is there anything specific that comes to mind when you think of connection between the two communities? I mean, you mentioned sports and the powwow and things like that. Yeah.
I don't know, okay, was there stuff that happened before, Mary, that hasn't started up again? I don't know if there was.
Some of it depends on the interest of the coach with a particular team. So if you go down the road to Carolinas, they're not playing him.
Mhm.
That was sort of a merit-based thing. It's an intro to basketball. This year, we're trying to get our kids interested in rugby, so that would be an add-on. I've just started today. It's going to run 2 days a week for the next while. So if there's something can come up. Lisa Nelson Smith just sent out stuff of ultimate frisbee. So I know that's something that's going to be taking place. We did have a demo with disc golf. I don't know where that will go down the road, but these are all important things.
Yeah,
It's less around just connecting.
yeah.
So one thing that is happening in May in Merritt is a battle of the books.
Oh, yes.
And I know some of our kids are going to be going up there too, when I'm going up as a board rep for Princeton to go and, you know, do what am I doing? I'm hosting one of the question periods. And so, you know, maybe that's something we could look at doing down here, something along those lines, and then invite the Merritt kids down so that we can have that interchange.
Anything around literacy, feeding kids together,
Yeah,
like, to me, all those things.
Could you know, like a quiz type game show afternoon or something like that? We could get that we could have the other schools come down. Just as because there's a lot of sports, but it's nice for, you know, I've got one kid that's really into sports and one kid who will trip over his own shadow. So the sports doesn't really, it's not as included for him. So I do like the idea of something like that on the books.
And sometimes even in Meredith, to get enough kids to have a team, because BC high school sports will say, oh no, that students in grade 8, they cannot play on that team. You go, we don't have them play on that team. We won't have a team. That's, well, okay, they can play on that team, but you have to forfeit every game. And you go, and you just shake your head and go, we're a small district.
Yeah. Mhm.
And I can just see on the Princeton with that many less kids at the high school is how do you,
You have to have half.
How do you get to
have
that
have half the
capacity?
grade Play to have two.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, maybe looking at events like that, that can be, you know.
Question number 4 is, how do you think resources should be allocated to support the key priorities identified in the strategic plan?
Over my head.
maybe one of the things we have done in the past, we haven't done it to take a pot and divide it equally based on per pupil. So PSS in the past has had a lower student number for some courses, simply because if you don't do that, you're not going to be able to run the courses. And so we might have a minimum size of 16 or 17 in merit, but a smaller number here because we recognize in order to run courses. So that's, you know, if you divided the money, say with all of the elementary schools and said to Barry, well, you're going to take this number of dollars and divide it by the number of students you have. You might end up on the short. I think you would, you could end up on the short end of something as opposed to saying, no, what's a base level you need there just to keep the doors open. If you look at something as simple as, a printer, it's like, regardless of the number of students you have, that piece of hardware costs a certain amount of money. You're not going to say, well, you're at Vermilion Forks, but could you run over to PSS because you don't have enough students to. So there's pieces of that where we look at that on dollars and go, no, there's an understanding that with less students, there's still some base. You don't say, well, you only get 3/4 of a principal because Central has more students, as an example. So that's one of the challenges when we look at that minus 700,000 is how do we manage that? That's equitable as opposed to equal.
For this year, as the busing increased, and then did money get used, like say from BFE to for like something that would have been used, if they wanted to be
Countertop.
like paint or construction paint, like was that used for busing, and then was that used, or like, what I like, went into to come up with the extra money, or did the district come up, or like?
So we looked at reallocation, and principals and schools have some autonomy over how they allocate those dollars. Can you hear me okay? I'm sorry, I got kicked off. But after further discussion with the board, an increase in extracurricular busing allotments was provided to each school, which helped support the extra busing costs that were needed for the remainder of this year. Vermilion Forks is an interesting one because they have a more inter-district travel. So just before spring break, we received the final budget for the year for what is predicted for bus travel. And I think the extra dollars that were provided will help that as opposed to reallocating dollars. So that was some good news.
And we drew this surplus down by, I think it was an additional 200,000 this year to try and bridge a portion of that. So it was 523 and now it's 720.
713.
713. So
I didn't know if it was school, like, if VFE had to come up with more money and take it from somewhere else. That was just my,
We will.
You will have to, yeah.
and we haven't done things like in Kelowna. They actually charge every family just to get to school. They charge $450 per student.
Mhm.
So if you have 4 kids, you're paying $1,700 just to get your kids to school. And we, as a rural district, said no, that's just wrong. And that was probably 15, 20 years ago, what the government of the day decided that busing was no longer a core service. It was not required. We maintained it, but I know that's, Kelowna was just discussing that, raising it by another $50 per student. And I'm thinking
Is that more common too? Because I know a lot of friends that pay for busing. Do you know it's more common that it's the thing? Right.
I don't know that it's super common, but it is used out there.
And that's another equity piece, just
Yeah.
because I live in a rural area, I have to, if we were somewhere like a Vancouver, New West, or even Kelowna that has a large public transit system, you know, I can take in schools in Kelowna where, there's a public transit bus that comes by every half hour. We don't, you miss the bus in Tulameen or in Coldwater, there's nothing coming till tomorrow morning, right?
Well, I grew up down on the coast. Didn't have buses that were, because that was not an option. So I came here and my kids are getting on the school bus. Like, this is an option. Like, my parents would be like, here's BC Transit, have a nice day. Like, or you walked.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it is. I think that, I mean, I'm not a good person to ask, because for me, that's super uncommon. This is the first time I've ever had a bus system.
And then the other side of that, or even quicker, Barry goes down to Science World, he's dropping about $1,200 to get there and back. If I'm that school in Burnaby, we're all taking our little bus pass and getting on the school.
Oh, you're gonna.
And we're getting on SkyTrain at the other end, and we collectively class spent $40.
So the final question we have here is, and I think we could word this a couple of ways. What I have here, are there any areas where you believe resources are currently over allocated or under allocated? And how would you suggest adjusting them? Or it could be more of a general question of where would you like to see additional allocations?
So that was my other one, I think, that's what I should have waited, but.
One piece I'm thinking about is food. Like, I'm really interested to know how other schools feed kids on a regular basis within our district. I have the total pleasure of when I was in Williams Lake. My kids went to a school, and I paid $750 a year, and every day they had a hot lunch. And they had a hot lunch woman who was a total rock star. She peeled every single cucumber because she thought there was high levels of pesticide. I mean, this woman was amazing. However, there was a full industrial kitchen in that school. When I came here, I was really surprised that the only school that has any kind of kitchen, like a proper kitchen, is the high school. And obviously this is like really, when I think about capital expenses, this is obviously long term. But what I would love, and would love for our schools, and I don't know how this could get started, but is proper kitchen sort of infrastructure in our elementary schools to hopefully one day be able to, provide students with lunch options.
Yeah, so we do have, the ministry actually just set up a new, it's called the Food Infrastructure Program. Currently this year, we have 2 schools that are going through that, Princeton Secondary and Merritt Bench Elementary. And then we also have another set of schools, and I believe it's one of the elementary schools here in Princeton. And so we are actively applying to that program. For
Is that like the update that Nikki just got to the kitchen here?
Yeah.
Those funds?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great.
So yeah, there's that. And we are receiving the Student Family and Affordability Grant is being redistributed this year. So we're receiving.
And that's a year-to-year
Yeah,
thing?
yeah.
Okay.
That's one of those special purpose funds.
Great.
We have the Feeding Futures Fund, which is to help with food initiatives. And then we have a longstanding program, Community Links, which is used to help with food related, but also to help with vulnerable needs as well.
The other one with that too is, do you put a commercial kitchen in each school, or do you take like your 2 large high schools and have something similar to NVIT has and have a culinary program, and they actually can prepare meals for those other schools as well? There's a couple of ways to approach that.
We have a new coordinator that will be working on those solutions, but I think that the topic is very important, along with the mental health one that was brought up. So any comments that you could provide around that is really helpful, whether we upgrade or provide kitchen facilities in all schools? We're almost there. Unfortunately, not so in Princeton quite yet. Or do we centralize and look at PSS as a possibility to help do what you were talking about, which is provide good quality food for all students? So it's right on our radar, and I think we're going to come to a solution hopefully fairly quick on it in some way, but it's a work in progress. So appreciate you bringing it up too.
It's great. I approached the hospital earlier this year because when I was a
Okay.
kid on the island, we were looking at hot lunch options. And so I thought, well, when I was a kid, our hospital at VGH in Victoria would prepare lunches and they'd go on trucks and they'd go out to schools. When I was a kid, it was just for disadvantaged children, which obviously isn't ideal. But anyways, so I thought, oh, I'm going to call the hospital and see if they would be interested in like catering a lunch once a week for our kids. And that woman was like,
Yeah.
do you know who you're calling? This is the hospital. Like, we are not in the business of feeding kids. I'm like, I'm just putting feelers out there. I just want to ask a question.
They don't even do laundry anymore.
That's it.
Laundry
They
is
do. I work there.
in American Kamloops, it gets sent to Calgary.
Oh no, Teresa's amazing. She's our laundry girl.
Like,
She's
what?
amazing. And yeah, no, she does a very good job here in Princeton. But anyways, yeah, I definitely think there's opportunities here and I'm excited the fact that it's already started.
I do like the idea of having a program here where they do the cooking and then it goes out, because I think that, you know, A, it teaches the kids something, and B, it cuts down on that initial capital cost of putting
Yeah.
a full kitchen in each school and staffing a full kitchen in each school. That can be difficult.
Yeah, for sure.
This must have changed though, because we used to do the cooking for the high school, like when I went to school here, so we did the whole cooking for the youth program.
The kids do to a degree, but I know this because my daughter comes home and complains about how she made a cake and wasn't allowed to eat it because it was for the lunch.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And so she gets really annoyed when 3 or 4 out of the, 5 days that they make something, it just goes to the cafeteria.
I love it.
So,
It's good.
so, that brings us to the end of our discussions. Now, that's not to say that if you have an afterthought, call into the office, send me an email. We're taking communication until April 12th. So this is not the end all be all. So I definitely want to thank you for coming out tonight. And yeah, so it brings us to the end of that, where I'm transitioning into another meeting that
He has another meeting with
6.
a bunch of us at 6.
Next one.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
Okay.
so thank you very
Well, thank
much.
you.
We're
Yeah.
done. Okay.
More.
Well, ultimately, yeah.
All right, okay, Steve, I'm
Thank you.
gonna end this meeting and join the other one.
Buckles your board.
Oh, yeah.